Oh, just for the intro. Just for the intro.
There you go. Good luck, everyone.
Okay.
Where do we sit?
Do you want to? Yeah, just come here. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Ah, mercy.
Shall I sit? Yeah, I'll just sit. Actually, that's easier. Oh. Oh.
Hi.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the first panel of this morning dedicated to energy. My name is Victor Jack, and I'm an energy reporter at Politico. It's been a little over a year since the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen first vowed to carry out a comprehensive reform of the EU's electricity market at the height of the worst energy crisis to hit the bloc in a generation, linked to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since then, a lot has changed. Electricity prices have gone down markedly. The Commission has pushed a far more targeted reform of the EU's power market, while fights over the file have shifted more onto state aid and industrial policy than anyone had anticipated, as the EU's competitiveness relative to China and the US has taken center stage. Still, the threat of another energy crisis is never far away, with the Israel-Hamas conflict once again putting question marks over the stability of supplies this winter. Our panel comes at an ideal time as EU negotiators head into the second round of interinstitutional negotiations on the file this afternoon and race to get a deal by the end of the year. A brief reminder to ask your questions through the Swapcard platform and to talk about us on X or the social media platform of your choice. And now, without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished panelists. With me in the room is MEP Nicolas González-Cesares, the rapporteur on the electricity market reform. We have Mathilde Worsdorfer, Deputy Director General at DG ENER at the European Commission. And we have Damien Cortinas, Chairman of the Board of ENSOE. And joining us remotely is Dr. Leon Hirth, Professor of Energy Policy at the Hertie School. Let's just see if he appears with us on screen. No? All right, well, in any case... Oh.
Good morning.
I think I heard a voice there.
Yeah.
There he is. Hi. Welcome.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. Great. So I want to sort of split our discussion into three broad topics. So sort of the politics of the power market, the urgent relevance of the file today, and sort of some of the gaps remaining and the broader issues at stake in the discussion. So I want to perhaps start with you, Nicolas. If we look back to September last year, obviously it's been quite the shift from the initial discussion we had on this, from the radical overhaul that was pledged by the Commission President to a more modest reform. I mean, with this perspective in mind now of over a year, does this file still go far enough, in your view, to reduce prices and protect consumers in the long term?
First, let me say that we have a reform of the design of the electricity market, so it cannot be modest, because it's always ambitious to try to reform the electricity market in times of volatility, because we are experiencing volatility since the war in Ukraine. Even before the war in Ukraine, the recovery from the pandemic, we had very high prices, but then it was crazy how the prices increase and increase. And it was a problem for all member states and, of course, for citizens in Europe. So reforming the electricity market is always a challenge. We can say it's modest. Yes, it's not a revolution. Probably we can say that it's not a revolution, but we are going to increase our ambition in order to reduce volatility, to give more stability to the power market with tools that give the signal that renewables are more and more introducing in the electricity mix. And for me also, one thing that is very, very important, how to increase the protection for consumers. Because we have energy poverty in Europe, around more than 10%, depends on the country, that it means more than 40 million people suffering energy poverty and vulnerability when it comes to the electricity prices. So it's a challenge. We had to make an ambitious reform. Yes, it's not a revolution, but some things should be changed in order to give more predictability. That is very difficult in these times. You mentioned the war in Ukraine, now the conflict in Palestine and the invasion of Gaza that we are having now. So I think we have to move forward to give this stability, but also to promote, of course, a decarbonized system in Europe, to promote renewables. That, for me, is one of the main things that we can do to solve the problem that we have.
Perfect. And Leon, I'd like to bring you in here as well. I mean, even though this has been a targeted reform, in the end, it did set out quite a few goals, which Nicolas has alluded to. So, bringing down bills for consumers, boosting renewables uptake, making the EU's industry cleaner, and then also ended up being embroiled in debates around industrial policy. Can this reform really achieve all of these aims, or does this sort of goulash approach create over-expectations about what it can do?
I think it does. So last year we've seen a discussion about electricity markets where people were voicing the ambition for electricity markets to serve industrial policy purposes, social policy, and even monetary policy. So we had discussions about the aim of the electricity market reform to be bringing down the headline inflation rate. And I think that's expectations that an electricity market simply cannot fulfill. So I think electricity markets are there to guide investment and dispatch decisions. So markets need to tell us where to build power stations, when to run them, what kind of power stations and how many. And if the market prices don't tell us, who would, right? How should we decide on these very complicated and complex decisions? So I think it's a bit of a pity that the discussion now centers so much on industrial policy. But to be fair, the electricity market reform itself is not an industrial policy package, right? It tackles a number of electricity market-specific issues, and where the discussion and the high-level politics is very much shaped by industrial policy discussions. That's not certainly the case for the entire file.
Great. And Mechtil, maybe I want to bring you in here as well. And yeah, I'll ask you for your take. I mean, are we trying to involve industrial policy too much in discussions of power market reform?
I mean, our initial proposal from March this year really wanted to tackle the energy prices, electricity prices in particular, after that unprecedented crisis we have seen and the high, enormous prices in August last year. It wanted to give more protection to the consumer and empower him or her, and while doing that, obviously also integrating much better and more renewables. And I think these three objectives are covered. Mm-hmm. When it then, in the debate, and our proposal foresees the redistribution of revenues, and we all think in high electricity, higher energy prices, a lot to redistribute. Hopefully, and our electricity or energy prices in general have already come down compared to last year. They still are relatively high compared to some of our competitors, but they have come down. So it doesn't mean that we live forever in a high price scenario. So we have to see the different sides. And here also, I fully agree what Leon here just said. The market proposal is not an industrial policy proposal. So, I mean, it became, because of the negotiations and the situation in different member states, it's one tool, an important tool, very important tool, but we are also working on Net Zero Industrial Act, the Critical Minerals Act just was adopted. We had a huge package with Renewables Directive, very ambitious. You were shadow as well there. Energy efficiency, where we define energy poverty. So we have to see it as a really important element, but of a bigger picture. Mm-hmm.
Great. And Damien, I'd like to bring you in here as well. I mean, there's new roles and expectations for ENTSO-E and grid operators contained within the text. Are you happy with how it looks from where you stand? And is there anything that worries you at the moment in either the parliaments or EU countries' discussions and positions in the proposal?
Thank you. The short answer is yes, we are happy with first with the fact that the package is there, and we really hope that the discussions going underway and led by Mr. González Casares will reach out. And why we are happy? We are the Association of European Transmission System Operators. We look at the issue in a systemic way. This is our nature, this is what we do. And things are linked. And this is maybe also why there is industrial policy discussion into this, because it's very difficult to separate. And something that for us is very important is that this package was meant at the beginning to solve a crisis. It was an adequacy crisis that transformed into a prices crisis. But what's important for us is that we put in place the mechanism that is going to help us achieve carbon neutrality. And for us, this is even more important because we developed a work last year that we call the Vision for a Carbon Neutral Europe, how a power system what will be the look of a power system fit for a fully carbon neutral Europe. And market design is one part of the puzzle. We need a market design that gives value to what will be needed in this power system that will be very different from today. And this reform is very, very welcome for that because it plants some of the bases that will be needed for tomorrow. More long-term view of the markets that gives signals to investments. Flexibility is going to be one of the most important things for us. Probably we'll come back to this during the discussion today. And the fact that we keep short-term markets. As Leon was saying, what is a market in the end? A market is a way to give value to what is needed. And shorter markets is what we need in order to be able to give the value to what is needed that is most efficient. So we are happy it exists. There are a number of things that will still need to be done. One of the most important things we are saying, we are taking this long-term approach, this is in our DNA, to look far into the future. This market design reform, again, is very welcome, but it will not be the end of the story. More things will be needed in order to have a proper market design for a carbon neutral future.
Great, I'm glad you mentioned that. We'll come back to that later. Leon, I'd like to bring you back in here. A lot's been made in recent debates about how the reform may end up benefiting member states with big budgets and large nuclear fleets like France, which can redistribute revenues it gains from state-backed investment schemes called contracts for difference to its industry. Some in Germany have even gone as far as to say that the heavy industry in the country could pack up its bags and head over to France. Do you see a risk of France gaining a competitive advantage in the EU relative to other countries as a result of this file?
I'm not concerned along these lines, but also I'm not thinking along the lines of industrial policy mainly, right? So I think we should make good electricity markets, and then industry needs to make the best out of this. But on your question, so to be frank, last year when this biggest crisis in at least 2 generations in energy markets in Europe hit, everyone was expecting the big French nuclear fleet to be a huge asset, right? Not using gas, not emitting carbon, and being available. In fact, EDF was, of course, going bankrupt last year after losing a double-digit number of billion euros because of the low availability of its nuclear fleet when it was needed most ever. So it's not that clear that this is an asset to the French energy system. But if it is, then I think it's just fair to let it be, right? If countries make good choices about their generation mix and build an efficient energy system, I think it's just fair that its consumers, both small and big, should also benefit from the resulting efficiency that is reflected in low prices. Mm-hmm. Will that lead to industry packing its bags across Europe and moving to France? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Even if France, and I think that's not clear, will have in the long term power prices that are 10 or 20 euros per megawatt hour, 1 or 2 cents per kilowatt hour lower than others, for 99% of the industry, this will not be a decisive factor, right? There's many, many other things that matter equally and more. There's very, very few industries where actually electricity prices have a very large share of overall costs, maybe aluminum, maybe copper, maybe parts of pulp and paper, and maybe very small fractions of the chemical industry like chlorine production. But if they move, if they decide to close a factory in Poland or Italy or the Netherlands or Germany, they will probably go globally to the place where electricity is cheapest and most abundant. And frankly, that's probably not France.
Fair enough. Mathilde, I want to bring you in here. Obviously, a key part of the compromise between countries and between France and Germany was essentially that France would be allowed to apply contracts for different CFDs on existing assets, but this would have to be double-checked by the Commission to make sure that it doesn't lead to distortions in the single market. Can you guarantee that the Commission will not cave to French pressure in assessing this, and that there will be no changes to the level playing field? What kind of criteria will you use to assess this?
Well, I think I need to be clear. We made our proposal in March, and now it's in the hands of the co-legislators. So what we have proposed on CFDs, two-sided PPAs, is really to stabilize and have a longer-term view on the prices. We have made a proposal how to use the revenues and so on. So now, this afternoon, and hopefully then in December, the negotiations will be finalized. There's a position from Council. There's a general approach, which was extremely difficult to get. So we supported from our role as honest broker. And then we have the Parliament who came with their opinion. So we are now really trying to support technically, because there are a lot of questions on the technical side. Obviously, we are in contact with different players. But now, our message is our proposal, and then we will see how it goes.
But I'd just like to press you on that. I mean, assuming that this does go through in the form that the Council sort of has proposed, Nicolas may have things to say about that. But assuming it does go through like that, what kind of criteria will you use to assess whether or not there could be distortions in the level playing field?
As I said, I mean, this afternoon we will discuss for a few things. The 19B, where you are, the key article is not on the agenda today. It will be a difficult debate because the positions from the two co-legislators are not on the same side, but it's too early to predict. I mean, as I said, we will support a very good deal.
Fair enough. So I'd like to now move to kind of and I'm glad you've mentioned it, the urgent relevance of the file today and the trilogues as well. Mathilde, I'd like to start with you again. I mean, although we're much better prepared this year for an energy crisis, for example, with gas storage levels now well over 95% full, experts say there's still a risk of more energy price spikes amid the Israel-Hamas conflict. How worried are you about the risk of energy prices spiking or increasing because of the conflict this winter?
Well, first of all, I think we are much better prepared than last winter. We will see the ENSO-E winter outlook. We already saw the ENSO-G gas outlook. So in terms of gas, the storages are still 95% full. We had relatively mild weather, so obviously now they're withdrawing. We are diversified, and energy efficiency, I always want to underline that, and demand reduction has been prolonged. So I think we are in a much better place. Also for electricity, the nuclear fleet in France is in a much better shape, if I may say so, than last year. Hydro is there. But we need to monitor. I think there are the geopolitics, as you mentioned, Middle East, which so far has not impacted heavily. So we have seen a little bit on the beginning on the gas price side, but oil prices might be affected. We will see. There's the oil market report from IEA. But for the time being, but we also have an ongoing war in Ukraine. And we might not be sure if there's a cyber attack, an attack. China demand is increasing. So we need to closely monitor. That's our key message here. We are out of the unprecedented crisis this breaks. There has always been volatility in the prices. We had seen in winter, a very cold winter in February so cold spells. But I think as far as we can say from today, we are in a much, much better place than last year.
So to sum up then, I mean, how high would you say you see the risk of price spikes this winter because of these geopolitical factors?
I think we are back to the normal risks we had in previous years, but we had COVID, and we have these geopolitical issues, so maybe slightly higher, difficult to say. But we are looking at the NSOE winter outlook.
Please go ahead.
We will be publishing today, so you will have here I would say the first point of the news. We published today what we call our winter outlook. Winter outlook is at the beginning of each winter, and so all the TSOs in Europe publish what's going to this winter to look like. Will we have enough generation to cover the demand? How are we going to manage the risk? In the whole of the continent, in every country. This is something we published today, and it's exactly as Metil was saying. We are going into a winter that, from market in the end is offer and demand. So the adequacy outlook, the winter outlook we do, this gives also a hint about the issue of prices, even if it's not strictly correlated. But we go into a winter that is going to be almost a normal winter. What we mean by that is that, from a generation point of view, we are very confident. Gas is there, nuclear is there, hydro is there. We have also the network. We have also all the countries that have put in place sobriety measures. These all contributes. We have some risk in some island countries, but they are local conditions that you will see in the report today. But this winter will be a normal winter in the fact that, as every winter, we have weather that can change. We have cold spells. We can have impacts in infrastructure. You will have a fault somewhere. This is something we cover. Winter is more stressed. This is why you see in winter higher prices. But we go into what we consider an almost normal winter.
Great, and thanks for giving us a little exclusive preview there. Nicholas, I want to bring you in here. Obviously, we have the second round of interinstitutional negotiations, trilogues today, where an array of issues will be on the table, including long-term industrial power contracts, short-term markets. How confident are you of a deal by Christmas?
First, let me say one reaction. I'm not so optimistic, sorry, like them, because yes, it's true, like Lion said before, that the electricity market is not a real industrial policy, but at the end affects industry. This is very clear, and it's affecting the industry in Europe. Sorry, it's the autumn. But we cannot be so optimistic because we are having almost or even more the double of the prices that we had in the past. So are we happy with that? We cannot be happy. This is the truth. This is the real truth. And we are suffering now is wholesale prices more than double than the previous to 2019, more than double than the beginning of the war. So the reality is that we are not very well. And the reality is that our competitors in other blocks like China and US have even the half of the prices we are having. So we are destroying our industry with these prices. Even more, we try to reduce demand because gas prices, but which part of this demand reduction is because industrial destruction? There is a part of that. And it is because we have very high prices still. So we have to give signals to the markets that we are working in a reform that works for future, for medium and long term, but also for short term. And I think that we are lacking in this reform of some emergency measures or some coherent emergency measures for future. But the Parliament didn't buy my idea. I had to defend other things, it's true, but I can feel that we will have a problem with that in the next year, because we are dealing with very high prices still. And people, it's true that people is not suffering the high bills previously, but the industry cannot gain again the competitiveness they have in the past. The only good thing we are seeing is that some member states that have a lot of renewables penetrating into the electricity mix, they can reduce the wholesale prices, and they can offer, for example, in PPAs, lower prices than others. But the solution is not betting, like Lion said before, betting in very old existing power plants. I don't want to say any technology, I'm saying very old existing power plants, betting money, giving state aid. By the time you can invest in renewables and give solutions to some of these problems. Sorry for this reaction. Regarding the trilogues, it's true that we are going to discuss this afternoon, evening, PPAs, flexibility, virtual house, very important points, but there are some points that we are not very far from the Council. But there are 3 or 4 points that are going to be very difficult to achieve an agreement. We will try to have a deal, at least a political deal, before Christmas, but I cannot assure it, because the reality is that we don't have a lot of time to negotiate. We have a trilogue today, maybe the 13th of December, it could be the 20th of December, but there are not too many trilogues to have an agreement, so we will try. We are putting, from the Parliament, we are putting our will. The problem is the Council. I have to say it. Not the Council, the presidency of the Council, because they can kill me, it's my country. No, not because that. It's because there were 2 countries that they were fighting, like almost always pacifically, I mean, but fighting, and we lost more than 1 month, almost 2 months of negotiation because of this discussion. Now we have a clear position from the Council. I'm saying clear, but it's very fragile position. It's not coincident with the one of the Parliament regarding CSDs. That is one of the main points of the discussion. And let's see. We will try to achieve this deal before Christmas, but because we had to put in place, we had to publish in the official diary of the European Union before the end of this legislature. Could be a risk and increased volatility if we don't have this electricity market design reform in place.
Great, and I'll come back to sort of that core sticking point in a second, but Damien, I'd like to bring you in again, and obviously a key tension point in the talks today will be about fresh obligations for member states to assess the long-term needs of their electricity system, so-called flexibility needs. So there's a little bit of a debate between member states and the Parliament about whether these needs need to be assessed 10 years ahead or for a shorter time period, and also whether the EU's energy regulator agency, ACER, should also draw up a report to assess the needs at an EU-wide level. Firstly, perhaps just in 30 seconds or so, would you mind explaining what flexibility is? And secondly, where do you stand on that particular tension point?
I'm very glad that you commented, because I think once you manage in the trilogues to get away with the more political part of the discussion, what remains is the flexibility is one of the most important things for the future, even if it's not the most political topic today. What do we mean by flexibility? Flexibility, it's I won't try to put it very simply. When you look into a carbon neutral future, this is going to be based mostly on renewables. Renewables, most of them are weather dependent. Wind power farms, you have wind, you have power. You don't have wind, you don't have power. Solar power plants, during the day you have power, during the night you do not have power. Flexibility, and this was not the case with the conventional generation, where mostly you can use it whenever you want. In the end, flexibility is the way to compensate for that. On the fact that at some point you have too much energy coming into the system, and we also see today, Vice President Šefčovič was saying before, we have moments today in Europe where there is too much energy, and prices become negative, and we need to curtail, which is a waste, because in the end this is energy that could be produced for very little cost. And tomorrow we are going to find a lot of moments where we will not have enough. Flexibility is what helps you compensate that. And there are a lot of different kinds of flexibility. It's how do you do for the peak loads during the day? How do you do if in winter you have 3 weeks without wind during the evenings? How do you feed Europe during the evening in winter when you have a couple of days or in a couple of weeks? And we need a market design that is going to provide value to these flexibilities. But in order to do that, and I come to this, I think this part of the equation, we need to be able to quantify them. What are we talking about when we talk about flexibility needs? How much? how much energy, how much power. Sorry for going a bit technical, it's not the same. Power and energy. For instance, electric vehicles can have a lot of power, but they only last for a couple of hours. So if you don't have wind for more than a couple of hours, you don't have enough energy into the system. And this quantification is something that we at ENSOE you have already started doing it. With the two levels, this needs to be done at a national level, but we also need a European view on the way we are doing it. We need to be able to quantify. This is an extremely technical work. What we would like in the regulation is that this need is acknowledged, but there is some flexibility, if I may use the word, in the way to need. Do not over-regulate who, how, and what, because this is something we don't know yet how to do it. This is something we are starting the work on that. It's very linked with our long-term analysis on grid adequacy, generation adequacy. We use the same tools, simulation tools. What we would like is to be able to do these flexibility needs before we go into how are they going to be procured. So we believe there should be a national and European stage, but we need flexibility in the way to do it. Countries are organized very differently. Within each country, we have different people who will be the best to do this analysis. So this is why we think that in a national level, this should be done, but with a bit of flexibility of whom. At a European level, of course, this needs to be monitored, but we think that we should be allowed to do this exercise because it's needed, because it's very technical, because this is one of the keys. If we don't have these flexibilities, the transition will not happen. We continue closing down the carbon generation of today. If we don't have the flexibility in front of us, at some point we're going to have a big problem.
Great, great, great. And I think just before we move on to our sort of our final theme, I'd like to bring it back to you, Nicolas, briefly. Obviously, as we've kind of elaborated and alluded to, the main tension point between the Council and the Parliament is on contracts for difference and how revenues can be redistributed from these. I mean, you've basically said that, you know, if there are investments in existing assets, you don't want any revenues recouped to be redistributed more than the initial cost of the investment or proportional to the initial cost of the investment. But you've also said your priority is to get a quick deal and a deal by Christmas. So my question is, are you willing to make concessions to the Council on CFDs?
Don't put pressure on me. The Council is doing this right now. We don't need more pressure on that. I mean, yeah, CSD is one of the main points of discussion, as I said before, very hard. And yes, from the Parliament, we believe that give money to this existing, with retroactivity, using state aid with retroactivity is not a very good idea. What we have to promote, and I'm technologically neutral, I'm not saying not give money to nuclear or only give money to renewables. I say we can give money to nuclear and state aid for these bilateral contracts for difference. But what we don't like is to give money for existing and previous, because maybe some of these power plants received in the past also state aid. And the reality is that it's not very efficient. As Lion mentioned at the beginning, it's not very, very efficient, this system. And you are giving a lot of state aid, but at the end, this company have a lot of problems. So, but I can understand there are some national problems. It's not the only one regarding French nuclear. There are other countries with the same problem, and there are other countries with fossil problems. So we will try to fix in the way that we can have not 100% happy everyone, but to have a satisfactory agreement. We have to move, all we have to move, not only the Parliament or the Council for sure. Let me be clear, regarding revenues, revenues from the CSD is not a money that a Prime Minister or every member state can decide whether they put this money. I think that we have some priorities, and the priorities are first, help vulnerable people that are suffering energy poverty, help to promote renewables. We have a problem probably with risk. We are running to this more decentralized electricity system, so we have to build interconnectors and to deploy more grids, so much money is needed for that. And during crisis, we have a price crisis, and the industry, the very intensive energy industry is suffering. we can help them with also with these revenues. But let me say one more thing. The CSD can have revenues, but also can have losses. So we have to assure that the CSD are very well done in every member state. You mentioned flexibility. One problem, flexibility is important when we have a big demand, but there are other moments that we have a lot of renewables and not so big demand, and we are having curtailments, and renewables are not giving the money that the investors are expecting. So I think these long-term solutions can help in order to give profitability to renewables and stability to the system. By the way, we are deploying more and more renewables.
Perfect. And then just with 10 or so minutes left, I'd like to move on to our final topic, which is kind of the gaps that remain. Damien has touched on this before, and Leon, I'd like to come to you. I mean, Damien has told me previously in an interview he thought it was a pity that capacity mechanisms, a bigger reform wasn't included within the legislation. But I'm keen to get your take. Firstly, what are capacity mechanisms, briefly? And secondly, should the Commission consider proposing perhaps a separate piece of legislation, reforming them in its next mandate?
That's a tough one, but let me, before I try to give an honest answer, let me come back to and follow up a bit to Nicolas Casares and power price levels, because I think there's two important pieces of information that we need to add and acknowledge. So you're absolutely right, of course. Power prices used to be around the 50s, 50 euros per megawatt hour in the 2010s, if you include inflation. Today, we are well above 100. Which is much better than the 300 and spiking up to 1,000 last year, but it's still double the price of the last 10 years. And it's much more than what you pay in Texas or in Philadelphia or in other parts of the United States, where you may be paying 30 or 40 euros per megawatt hour. So why is this? One reason is natural gas. It's just much cheaper to get natural gas off the ground in the US than buying it as LNG. And that's still the legacy of Russia's decision to cut its European gas supply and invade its neighbors. But the other important reason is carbon pricing. We are pricing in the cost of climate change as a carbon price, and they don't. That has nothing to do with electricity markets or market design. And I think it's the right thing to do, because we are making an effort to protect the climate in a way that our American friends do not. And paying a higher electricity price that's reflecting the true and honest and real existing cost of climate change is I think, the right thing to do. And it's a problem that the Americans don't do this, but it's still the right thing to do. Also, I think we should acknowledge that there's a lot of subsidy and compensation schemes there to pay the industry, right? So member states for many years now can and do that in practice to pay out compensation mechanisms for the price increasing effect of carbon on electricity, and hence the high prices that you see on the power exchange is not necessarily what they effectively pay after receiving that compensation. I think these two observations are important, but let me move to capacity mechanisms, which is, of course, a difficult question, and is absolutely right that this is something many expected to be in that reform package, and that it's not. I think there's good reasons to believe we need some sort of capacity mechanism. The economic argument is that you don't need this if policymakers, regulators, and the general public accepts that prices sometimes spike and let the markets work without intervening. Last year, I think, was pretty clear that that's not what's happening, and interventions take place, and neither politicians nor the general public will accept high prices without getting very nervous. Economics tells us that under this condition, we need some sort of capacity mechanism. But economics also tell us that designing good capacity mechanism is extremely difficult and complicated, and you can do a lot of things really wrong, and then the outcome is worse than not having anything at all. So I think setting more clear guidelines about what a good capacity mechanism is, for the experts, I think that goes along the lines of reliability options. That's something that I think would be a good thing for the Commission to do. If this requires a separate legislative act, I'm less sure, but I'm not a legal expert. It could well be that this is something that also would fit well into state aid guidelines.
Great, thank you. And Mehtila, I'd like to get your take on this. Would you be open to exploring a proper reform of capacity mechanisms in the Commission's next mandate?
Well, I think we are in the midst of negotiating a targeted but extremely important reform. I think, and we have a couple of issues which are more technical, and by the way, the Spanish presidency does a great job, because apart from the political trilogues, there are daily technical trilogues or working groups, so I think we can advance there. We decided on a number of issues which are known. We decided in our initial proposal not to change the capacity mechanism, the article which is in, because we want to come out with guidance. We already had workshops and make it easier, simpler, the procedures faster, and I do agree the debate has shifted. 2018, when we had the clean energy package, most member states were in favor, or most people, in energy-only markets. But now they see much more of a need if it's well designed. So I think that's something we need to work further once we have adopted our current proposal. If then it's a guidance, as we have foreseen right now, or another proposal we will see when the new Commission starts. I think we had a huge package right now. But it gives us time also next year to reflect and make studies, and there are a few areas we could think of, certainly if we go for renewables of 42.5 or even higher, but I think it's too early to say.
But so you're open in theory?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Great, so another core issue, and we don't have too much time left, but I think it's essential that we talk about it, is repairing Europe's aging grids and getting them ready for the clean transition. Many of them are over 40 years old. Damien will be very familiar with this. Many experts say it's a key bottleneck in the green transition. Damien, I want to come to you. The Commission is proposing a grid action plan in the next couple of weeks on November 29th. Given some of the issues we've talked about, what concretely would you like to see in that grid action plan?
A lot of things, I would say. But first of all, again, we think it's very, very good that there is now a political realization that transmission was becoming one of the bottlenecks for the energy transition. This grid action plan also is also very needed. With following a little lead from the Commission, we did a forum at the beginning of September with all the industry there at the highest level, all the stakeholders, where we discuss about that. And there are four main areas that we need to change if we want to have grids that are there for energy transition. This is the financing, the regulatory framework, the supply chain, and the public acceptance. Those are mainly the four. Some of them probably will need at some point some legislation, but this is something that can be worked later on. There are a lot of things we can do without legislation. There is a political drive to be had there. Financing, if I say a few words, financing is how to de-risk the finance of this grid that will be needed. Regulation, how can we accept that some of the investments need to be done by anticipation? And what I mean by that's what they are ready when the renewables are going to come and when are there. Supply chain, today there is a clear bottleneck. Today every transmission and distribution system operator that is working in Europe says we don't have the suppliers that are there to build when we need. Today there is a clear bottleneck. There is a lot that can be done, but for this we need to work with the whole industry. And a political drive from the Commission will be very helpful in order to quick start the discussions that then need to be taking place. We have world-class manufacturers in Europe. We do in all these areas. How can we give the certainty that they need in order to build capacity so that we will have the materials, the components, and everything that is needed there? And the way to make sure that this infrastructure is accepted by the public, one of the main problems we have is that the impact of the infrastructure falls into communities who are not always the ones who benefit from it. How we tackle that? How we compensate, how we listen to them, and how we have a clear political message that this is necessary. This is necessary for the whole of Europe, for the country, for the region, and not only for the community itself.
Perfect. Mehtila, I want to bring you in here. Should Damien wake up on the 29th in a good mood, will these concrete points be included within the action plan?
I think he will wake up with a good mood. I hope so. First of all, I think we recognize obviously the missing link in all sense, the grids. We will focus on the transmission system operators, but also the distribution, because more and more we see the need also here to give it to the homes. Or there will be certainly in the action plan to look at where are the needs. We have the PCI, the Project of Common Interest, by the way, also coming out the same day, published. We need to look how to smarten them, make it more digitalized and smarter, sometimes also use them more efficiently, the existing ones, but also looking at the skills issue, on the material issue. We hear cables are not there enough, and the financing issues, I think, and the regulatory framework. So I think we will cover those areas, but we try to be as concrete as possible. So we had the wind power action plan 2 weeks ago, where we had very, very clear actions, concrete, and that is where we are working on now.
Perfect. And just before we end, I'd just like to go around everyone and just ask one question, if you could just respond very, very briefly. Another interesting issue that's come to light in light of the leak of the Finnish-Estonian Baltic Connector gas pipeline is, again, threats to critical infrastructure. Some experts say that the threat of cyber attacks on our grids and on our electricity infrastructure is a possible risk as well. Should the Commission, in its next mandate, explore options to beef up its monitoring or even sort of enforcement to make sure that these grids are essentially protected from cyber attacks?
First, cyber attacks are going to happen if we have more grids, more interconnectors, and more digitalization. But we cannot stop digitalization, so we have to have plans to protect this infrastructure. But let me say one thing about grids that is very important. We need more grids to accomplish renewables, but we have a very important lack of interconnections, and we are not complying the targets of the 10-year regulations. There is a ridiculous numbers of interconnections in some countries of Europe and some regions. So we have to solve this. Yeah, we can have an action plan for grids. Very well. I agree with you. We need more grids, and it's clear in the Renewables Directive the way we have to, the line we have to follow. And public acceptance is also very important. We have to give a good planification, a well-design of the grids, because it's true, we need more and more, but we are closing and phasing down some power plants. So we are going to have holes, and we have to take advantage of these holes. It's not build a grid because we have a windmill there. We need a good planning. I mean, if we want public acceptance, we also need good planning and avoid some of the very well necessary protected areas, because biodiversity and so on. Because we cannot do this transition in order to have more renewables, but we have more biodiversity loss. This is a climate crisis of the whole planetary system. It's not only because we are emitting CO2, it's because we are losing a lot of species. Don't forget that, please.
Great, and just we're running over time, but I just want to get the quick answer from everyone else as well. Should the Commission explore setting up plans to protect critical infrastructure from cyber attacks? Mathilde?
I mean, we already have a critical infrastructure regulation, and energy is a key part of it. So it's already existing. We implemented in January, I think, and entered into force. And we say energy is one of the key, because of Nord Stream 2, because of the Baltic Connector, because whatever could happen, and it's absolutely crucial. We see it, the attacks in the Ukraine before last winter, it might happen again. So, I mean, it has a crucial role. That's why we already started. It's not only the energy ministries, it's also the interior affairs. So we have to work hand in hand. Some member states are doing already quite a thorough analysis. Others we have to push. But I think probably there's no 100% coverage. I mean, it's by definition quite difficult, but we have already stepped up, and I'm sure that remains a crucial issue also in the future.
Damian?
What I want to say is that cybersecurity is one of our key priorities for TSOs. It has been for a number of years, it's still today. One of the things we try to do also through our association and SOE, we have countries for which have been doing this for a number of years, who have a lot of experience. They're doing that, how these countries can help those who need it more, so that we can reach, in a system, the weakest link gives the strength of the whole system. So for us, what is important is everyone gets up to to a level where this can be tackled, but this is a high priority for us. And this is something I think we are taking very, very seriously, and in any case you can be confident on that. This way of helping all the countries and all the areas in order to do that. Cybersecurity is not the only thing. We have one of the things about transmission distribution is that the infrastructure is out in the open. So physical security is as important as cybersecurity. Maybe this is also a message to be given there.
Okay, perfect. Leon, unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. Apologies about that. But I'd like to thank all the speakers so much for their time today and for their valuable contributions and for a lively discussion. So just as a bit of information for everyone in the audience, there'll be now a networking break, and the conversations and panels will resume at 10:55 with a debate on Europe's just transition. Thank you very much.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.